Jeremy O'Neill and Diane Cashman from UCD. They undertook a two-stage project to design a coolly Irish tool, like a coolly Irish tool, and the process to assist academic staff and educational technologists who are engaged in blended online and face-to-face program and module design to learn from self and peer review of their designs. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have a question and answer session at the very end of the three presentations.
Okay, thank you very much. Very happy to be here. I suppose just to say that this is research that we did in part of UCD. I'm now in the National Forum, so I'm wearing two hats. But this is very much work that has been done in the last few years from UCD Teaching and Learning. I suppose just to start, it follows nicely on from Louise's talk. Where's Louise gone? In that we also have this dilemma of that online and blended learning is really something that is kind of owned by a lot of different staff. It is owned by academic staff, administrative staff, managers, education technologists, library staff, the students. There's a big group of eclectic people trying to get this right. And I suppose our own experience with this has been that when you come to program design and module design, depending on who's the big player, is how things get designed. So what we really felt at the beginning was that we needed to develop something that would help staff, and I use staff in a very broad sense, who are involved in this design of programs and modules to try and do it in an informed way, okay, to try and do it in as best way as possible. And there are tools out there to help do that. There are international tools and national tools. But we felt that there was kind of a need to have something that was nationally owned, and that was kind of the driver for doing it, okay? So, this way is it? I'll use that. Do it manually. So the aim of the project was to develop a tool to enhance online blended program and module design. Okay? And in doing that, we wanted to also design some sort of a process that would help staff use it. Okay? And we wanted it to be in a kind of developmental enhancement way. Okay? Not in a sort of a quality and auditing kind of way, but in an enhancement way. So that was the aim of the study. And we designed the study, as I say, it's nearly 2 years old at this stage, and this was kind of broadly the design of the study. To start with, we needed to kind of get what we meant by sort of the idea of an online tool. So this involved a kind of preliminary conceptual decisions and item generation, and we used Whitting et al.'s kind of model of designing an instrument. So last year at EdTech 2015, we presented what we came up with in relation to sort of the idea of what should be in a tool, what are the conceptual ideas behind it, and a sort of a gathering of initial ideas of what should be in the tool. This paper today is looking at the face validity of what we had from that part of the study. And we would see stage 3, if we do get into EdTech 2017, that we would prevent maybe sort of the tool after it's been piloted. So that was kind of roughly the design of sort of the study. In the very, very beginning, we were looking at lots of different kind of e-learning frameworks and, how would we organise it and what would it look like conceptually. And we actually came up with the idea that we would actually go beyond a lot of the models and use one that was to do with kind of curriculum design, okay? So we went with more of a curriculum design as a kind of more holistic way. After a lot of thought and a lot of exploration, ran a workshop on it actually as well to look at this. And for those who want to look at this kind of a more sort of detailed thing, we have a kind of a resource around that. Very briefly, because I don't want to reiterate what we did last year, but very briefly where we started was we asked 18 experts around the country, and we used a mixture of educational developers, academic staff, educational technologists, people who we, I suppose, through our own connections and networks, were expertise in the country. And they helped us we asked them, could you tell us what you think is important to have in a program design tool, and could you help us to just think what should be in a module design tool? And they came up with lots of ideas. And so this is a range of eclectic staff, technologists, academic staff, people who are in kind of management and administrative library, a good mixture of staff. And they came up with lots of ideas. They came up with 379 ideas for program design and 418 for module. And then they were asked to rate them, and they then actually brought them down to about 100 program and 18 module. So the next part of it was, well, how do we actually refine these even a little bit more? Because 100 statements for program nobody's going to use, and certainly and 80 for sort of module they weren't going to be using either. So we used a process called the Delphie Study, which is a methodology some of you may well be used to. It's quite used in health sciences, medicine and social sciences. Actually, it's history of social sciences, I think, in the 1950s. And basically the ideas with the Delphie is that you use experts. So we decided to use a wider group of experts at this stage. So we moved beyond the 18. Talk about that in a minute. And you basically ask the experts, well, what do you think is important and what would you rank as important to be in this tool? So you're trying to build consensus, okay? So we're trying to build a national consensus of what people, I know they are kind of, not everybody, but sort of a group of experts that were sort of identified, and they themselves in a kind of a snowballing kind of a way identified others. And basically the Delphie is a way that you actually build consensus. Yes, well, they're more important, this is more important, and you're actually trying to get kind of a group sense. All right, so that's basically what a Delphie does. And in practice, what you usually do is Delphies often have maybe about 3 rounds to them. So you kind of send something out to the experts and they say, yes, this is what I think, and then you send it out to them again, to the same group, and you say, do you still think this? And sometimes there is even a 3rd round. We had 2 rounds within this stage, but we also, if you remember, had the earlier round. So in essence, we would have had around 3 rounds. And what really, just to give you a sense of what people had to do, in the kind of round 2, so people say, yes, I think this is really important in relation to program design or module design, and you get all the data back, and then you give it back to people. Okay, in the second round you say, okay, well, the responses to round 1 have been analysed and presented back to you in the second round. In order to build consensus on these statements, you're asked to re-rate it, okay? On which items you now think should be in the tool. Now it sounds like, oh my God, you're doubting my judgment, but it is about saying, well, a lot of people thought this, do you still think this? So it is this idea of actually developing a common sense of what we think should be in this tool. In some ways, again, putting on Louise's idea, that it is about trying to, I suppose, theorise from practice and from people's expertise. So it is building on people's practice and expertise and that range of expertise to get consensus. So what we did for program design, we decided actually that they're actually both quite big. So what we would do is we actually did them as 2 separate processes. So we separated out the program design kind of statements and to the module design statements, and we used a different group, so if you want to call them group B, to do program design, and group C to do the module design. And I suppose we made a bit of a judgment call on kind of the sampling. It was a little bit like people that we knew, and we said, listen, these are, well, program design maybe needs to be slightly more kind of people involved in that space, so we just made sure we used kind of more people who were kind of like program directors and, more people involved in that kind of more, I suppose slightly more senior staff were involved in actually that program design piece, in with kind of educational developers, library staff and other staff and that. And the module design, I suppose we leaned a little bit more probably towards the learning technology, people who were sort of definitely on the ground with module design and that sort of thing. So I suppose there was a little bit of a judgment call. The other thing we did do in relation to the sample was we kind of worked off the people we knew. We worked off people with ed tech and people in that space, people we knew were working in that space. And we asked them to pick up people in their institutions as well. So it was a little bit of if you feel there's people in institutions that could answer these questions, please refer it on to them. So it was a little bit of a snowballing effect. So they were, as I say, 50% of the sample were academic staff, and then there was about 30% educational technologists, about 15% educational developers, 5 or 6% library, and maybe 5 or 6 kind of administrative and management. So there's a good mixture in there. 53 were in round 1 in the program design, and then we sent it back to them again, and 30 responded. So that's the same group, okay? And then the same with this, 17 to start in the module design, and more people came back in the second time around. So we don't exactly know what exactly our sample is. Because it was anonymised, we know how much response we got, but we're not in touch with, because obviously a couple of people came in there and a couple of people didn't come in back in there. So and we did anonymise it. If we were doing it again, we might think of actually not anonymising it and de-identifying it later, but that's what we did. Then we did, I know this is quite statistical, but those of you that are interested, we still needed to filter from 180 down to sort of, kind of statements that we usable. And these are the steps we used, and we used Holy et al.'s kind of article to help us with this. And we kept statements that were 80% and over, so they were asked to rate between 1 and 5, so kind of 4s and 5s, that's one particular way of doing it. So those that agreed or strongly agreed, the statements. And that was consistency within the round. We used the quality, so we got some lovely qualitative comments from people saying, I wouldn't have this, or I might change this. So we used the comments as a ways of removing. So if some people said, well, is that not also covered in that statement? We said, well, actually, maybe we could remove that one because, yeah, people feel. Or ones that were a lot of controversy about, and not that it wasn't to use challenging stuff, but where people were really disagreeing, and it's about consensus. It is about trying to draw consensus. We removed those with very large standard deviations. It's again another way of indicating a lack of consistency. If there's huge range, it's a lack of consistency. Removed any final few with low mean scores. Again, it's another way of sort of teasing it out. But we decided within the categories we had not to lose any, and I'll show you the categories now in a second. And then we had this final qualitative judgment, if you want to call it, where we said, we had to make sort of an expert decision on whether things should and shouldn't do. And that's kind of very much what Delphi's do. It is very much a mixture of quantitative, qualitative, to make a kind of a good judgment, or as best you can. So we filtered the program design statements to about 43, and we filtered the 80 to around 39 final statements. So, so what we have is a tool. Looks like this, available for you to use online. I'll give you the link afterwards. So we have a tool, okay, that has 43 statements around program design and 31 statements around module design under these categories. Now these categories came from the original conceptual work that we did, okay, in the first phase. So they're common ones that are used across program and module design, and these. So the statements are under these kind of areas, all right. What I would, just to give you a sample, I won't give you all of them, but the blue ones here are related to program design. And I suppose what I'd like to say at this point, I think Diana will reinforce it as well, is that interestingly, given this is a tool that has come from the ground up, okay, this is not from us, these are from you, and thank you to those in the room. I know there's quite a few of you here who were part of the study, and I'd like to thank you for your contributions, because it was a long thing to fill out. But what came out is, and we started with the view that this is around online and blended programs, okay? We did have that focus, okay? But what did come out was that a lot of the statements, surprise, surprise, are also statements that could be used for a completely face-to-face or a lightly blended program or module design, okay? One of the things that came out in the early stage as well was people were saying, maybe a bank of statements would be good to use because we could use these, but if there was others we could draw on, or we decided not to use these, maybe that would be useful. Well, many of the statements, when you could say, well, is that not just good practice in face-to-face? And yes, it is good practice in face-to-face. But isn't that one of the problems sometimes with design, particularly online programs, is that nearly gets dropped in the design. So this, as I say, came from yourselves. And it was things like the program contains a balance of formative and summative assessments. The technology used is supportive of the assessment strategies in the program. Program structure is clearly evidenced to students, articulated verbally, visually, or both. An evaluation strategy includes a range of stakeholders. And then the more module ones were like learning activities and assessment activities are constructed and aligned with learning outcomes. Opportunities for student to teacher interaction are provided. Module orientation materials are available online for those unable to attend in person. The online learning environment is well organised, consistent and easy to navigate. we would say that probably the module ones did have more technology, things that emerged from it. But, you know, maybe that wouldn't be unusual in itself, because that's where you get into the more detail of sort of what's it. So they're kind of a sample of the statements. So, as I say, one of the findings that we did have was that the, you know, people have come back and said, I could use this for face-to-face. So it may well be a tool that can actually equally be used in all these spaces. So to talk a little bit more on the process, I'll hand over to Diana.
Yeah, so I suppose just to wrap up the presentation, I'd like to maybe present what we would propose a workflow to be for using such a tool. I know a lot of us have conversations where let's do a curriculum review, let's have a chat, and you're like, oh, okay, and you know, it's very hard to figure out what do we actually do, what are the steps, and how do we coordinate a large group of people who will be involved in the programme. It's actually not as straightforward as the notion of let's just have a curriculum review and we'll come up with a great action plan. So this is our effort based on Geraldine and I's experience of working with programme teams as a way of implementing this tool for yourselves in practice. So taking, say, a programmatic review, what we would suggest is that you could just download this tool and print it off, and we would suggest that individuals go off and do a bit of homework to start off with and just have a go at filling out the tool. You just get a bit of peace and space in mind to actually review it and think on your own before being fully influenced within a group. So that would be the very first step we would suggest. And then you kind of get into your team meeting, and this is a really nice way of actually structuring a curriculum review type meeting where you get people into groups and say, right, what were the things that were coming out for you? What were the things that you noticed that were particularly missing? And I'll come back to this slide in a sec. So there's levels in the tool that we defined as well, which helps you to try and orientate that conversation. And there was quite a bit of debate about what the levels would be. How do you actually rate a statement? Is it yes, no, it's done? So we came up with this scale based on the feedback from our key focus group, is that really there's 4 key areas that there might be a particular aspect of your programme that's, you know, you do it really, really well, and you know you'd love to share that with somebody else, and that's really an exemplary type component to your programme. You might rate other aspects, which would be, yeah, we do that, it's grand, we work's a treat, and that's more, you've achieved it, we might be able to do a teeny bit more work. There's another level then around needs further development, and again we kind of put a bit of kind of textual, descriptive text on this to say sometimes things are not done within a programme. Most of the staff are actually pretty aware of the reasons why. It's not as if you haven't thought of it, it's just maybe logistics, practicalities, resources. So it's an opportunity then to tick that box, say, I know it needs a bit of work, I just don't have the time, funding, so on and so forth. Again, there might be just areas where significant development is needed, you just didn't think of it, oops. I would love to maybe work on that. And then finally, some of the statements, of course, may not be applicable to every single programme. So again, this is a nice way of kind of structuring your conversations. You can come back in the team. It helps you then to start prioritising what is it that we don't have information about. And there's one statement here in the programme, just kind of draw your attention, number 30. A consistent and coordinated approach to the programme assessment and feedback should be evident. So is there, you know, a programme assessment strategy document, for example? Have we even thought about that? And these are things that might trigger a high priority curriculum review process you might need to go away off and design and consider. So when you have that, then you might need to go off and, well, maybe there was a document, maybe this group hadn't thought it through historically. You go find more information, bring it back again. So again, you're really moving through those conversations, having a really strong discourse and dialogue. And that's particularly important for particularly important for this curriculum review process. The tool is an enabler to these conversations. It is a catalyst to the conversations, helps structure the conversations. That's our hope. It's not a shopping list of whether or not you've done it. It is just to promote structured discourse, and hopefully then by the end of that you would have a series of actions that you can then order, prioritise, and you know then that whatever you work on is based on evidence, you've thought it through systematically, rather than maybe sometimes having conversations about, I think there's something wrong with the programme, and you're just maybe looking at one particular aspect of that. So again, it's a similar workflow then for the module one. You might just do it in a smaller team, but the same principles apply. I suppose then just to finish up, running out of time now, is that, you know, as Geraldine said, we have a link to this, a link to the tool online, and it is, that's the URL. We're happy to tweet that out as well, in case you might want to scratch that down really quickly. We'd love for you to have a go, very much. We'd love to hear you have a go. There's a survey at the very end of the tool. We'd really love to hear your feedback. If you do ever sit down and do a workshop with your colleagues, or you might use it on your own, please fill in the survey. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Our email addresses are there as well. So I just wanted to maybe just finalise things, just to say that, reiterate what Geraldine mentioned. We really think this tool actually can be applicable to traditional programs that are face-to-face and no technology in it. But again, I think we might see technology really seeping in on any program at any stage, at any particular level. So maybe it's not as differential as what we may have started off with thinking about. Again, we believe this tool is a valid one. It's gone through robust, systematic iterations of actually defining what the statements should be. And then the final thing there is that it's about enabling a conversation, it's about enabling a structured and systematic review, and it's about facilitating staff who may want to do things at a broad program work, but also can be used at an individual perspective.